Again, welcome to today's webinar, which is a MemoQ 4.5 advanced webinar. As usual, I'm not going to show you any PowerPoint, no Death by PowerPoint in these webinars, but let me know the general outline of the topics that I want to cover today. This is slightly different from some of the previous MemoQ advanced webinars that I have done. I will have three main topics today, plus, depending on time, possibly a fourth one. The first one, I will be dealing with terminology, including how to import terminology from an Excel file, what to do, how to save it as CSV, and then how to do the import in MemoQ, and also talk to you a little bit about terminology options within MemoQ. The second big topic is going to cover live docs and translation memories, but go a little bit into some depth about both of these features in MemoQ. And then I will say a few words about different kinds of resources that are neither translation memories, nor term bases, nor live docs corpora, such as ignore lists, autocorrect lists, and how to change abbreviations, where segmentation rules are also a resource in MemoQ. Finally, if we have time, I will show you a few neat things about views, but that also depends on time. We do have a separate webinar for views. The webinar lasts approximately 45 to 60 minutes. If you have any questions as I'm talking, also don't hesitate to type in the questions box, and there will be ample time as usual for questions in the end. So please feel free to save your questions to the end or type them at the moment where you can think of them. Before I begin, let me ask you a couple of questions though. The first one is where you are from. So I can see that the majority of you have already answered. Thank you very much for casting your vote on your geographical location. I'm going to share the results. I can see that the majority of you are from Europe. We have some from the Americas and some from Asia, especially those of you who are in Asia. It must be pretty late, so again, thanks for joining. I have another question, which is about MemoQ and whether you are a MemoQ user or not. Again, I see your votes adding up. So again, thanks for answering the question. I'm going to share the results as well. I can see that the vast majority of you are MemoQ users. I hope this webinar will give you a lot of new insights. And we have some that have tried MemoQ but have not decided to purchase yet. That's also very nice. And maybe after this webinar, you will decide to do so. All right, I will not bore you with questions anymore, so let's jump into my first topic, which is about terminology. So the very frequent question we are getting is, I have my glossary in an Excel sheet. How can I put that glossary into a MemoQ term base? I did come prepared with such a glossary. That is this Excel file on my desktop. So this is a very simple one. As you can see, I also enlarge it a bit so you can see it better. It's basically just two columns. There's a first column for English terms and a second column for German terms. This is the glossary that we are going to import into MemoQ. The first thing to do is get out of Excel. And the way to do that is to go to File and Save As. In Excel 2003 and before, this will be in a menu, but the logic is the same. And in this Save As dialog, just look at the bottom drop-down list and take your pick for a different format there. Now, the format that I recommend is Unicode text. It's very important. I think this is the best thing to choose. So that's what I'm going to do now. And then Excel will save an identically named file with a different extension for TXT. You have to OK away a couple of messages when you do that. Normally when we do the import, we refer to that as CSV in MemoQ. We will see that in a moment, and that stands for comma-separated values. It is also possible that you already have your glossary in that format. I'm also going to save an identical CSV file from Excel, which is another option here in the Save As dialog, CSV, comma delimited, just in order to show you why I think this is not necessarily such a good idea. The reason is when you choose the CSV format, you are likely to get into trouble with the file's encoding, which is not a problem for Unicode text. Okay, so that's all we need to do in Excel. Now, here are my new files, and let me move on to MemoQ. I'm just going to fire up a copy of MemoQ here. As a first step, I'll just create a project. I don't have a project at hand. Sorry about this extra step. I did not come prepared with a project, but those of you who have used MemoQ, this is a routine step. So I'm just going to call it Webinar English-German, and the language pair is English to German, and I just click Finish. I'm done here. So I've got my project. And go to Term Bases. And when you import a glossary in MemoQ, you always import into an existing term base. You can see two existing term bases here. Neither of these are on my computer. One comes from a really funnily named server called KillGray-doesn't-exist.com, which is our test server. The other is MemoQTM.com, our demo server. But I'm going to create a new and empty local one for the purpose of this import. So I just use the Create New Link, Webinar import TB. I'm calling it English and German are already ticked in the list of languages because that's the language pair of the project that I'm sitting in. So there I go. I have my new term base. It's selected in the list, and now I just choose the import from CSV TMX command. I did this using a context menu. You can of course use the links under the list. It's just the same. Now I can browse to my file. First, let me show you how MemoQ behaves with CSV, and then I'll quickly go on to the text file. And if you look at the bottom, there's a preview of what MemoQ sees from the file. And this is exactly what I want to point out. All the non-basic Latin characters, the non-ASCII characters in German are wrong, and that's because you need to specify the encoding in order to get the correct import from a CSV file. So as a first step, just to be on the safe side, always take a look at the preview at the bottom, and if it doesn't look right, then choose a different encoding here at the top. This is going to be Windows Latin 2, I believe. And there it is. As I change the encoding, I can already see that the characters show up all right. I'm going to leave this dialog now and go through the same process again, but this time choose the TXT file. If I do that, because that's a Unicode file, then I have spared myself this extra step of getting the encoding right, and you can see that the characters show up okay in the first place at the bottom. Now you need to tell MemoQ which column in the glossary stands for what. If you were a keen observer, you could see that in the Excel file, the first column had English as the designator of that column in the very first row, and I did not put anything in the second column. MemoQ looks for English language names in the first row, and if it finds them, then it uses that word that stands there to know that that column belongs to, in this case, English. So for the first column, I'm already done. MemoQ knows that this field should be imported as an English term into my glossary. However, I did not put German on purpose into the second column, which for MemoQ at this point is only field 1. So I need to explicitly tell MemoQ to import field 1 again as a term, but this time a German term. And this is basically, for such a simple glossary, all I need to do to get going with the import. In your glossary, you can also have other columns for definition, which is on a language level, or note, or some other field. You can also assign those fields here. But now we are dealing with quite a simple file, so I'll just proceed. MemoQ performs the import. If it's a long list of words, this can take some time, but this is actually an operation that can happen in the background. Just to verify the results, I'm going to open this term base for editing. And as you can see, there are all the terms, all the glossary entries that come from my file. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to explain about 3 terminology features in MemoQ that I find really cool. One is forbidden terms, another one is prefix matching, so that you get the right terms highlighted and only those in your text. And the third is the case sensitivity setting. Okay, in order to do that, I'm actually going to add a sample document. It's a really silly document. It's a Word document that's sitting around on my desktop. Let me just import that. I got a remark from Caroline that sound is fluctuating, although her volume is on maximum. If anybody else gets that problem, please let me know in the questions box, because then probably the problem is on my side. All right, so I have this sample document here. Don't really mind what the content is. It's also something that I want to use to demonstrate segmentation a little bit later on. I'm going to look at the 7th row here, which has technology in there. And of course, I get technology as a term-based match. But if you take a close look, there's also a second word in there, which is technologies. And that is not highlighted because in English, the Y turns to an I for the plural. And that is exactly where this prefix marker that you can enter into your term comes to the rescue. Let me show you how to do that. I'm going to right-click this terminology there to edit it. And I'm going to change my source term. I'm going to change my source term by adding a pipe after the G. Now this is difficult to see, so I'm going to copy this for you and put it in a Word document just to make sure you see what I typed in there. Here I can really zoom in. So I basically just added this marker there, which is not a letter L, it's a pipe character. On the US keyboard, you can get it by pressing Shift \. I believe on the Hungarian keyboard, you can get it by pressing the right Alt key and W. And probably most Central European keyboards are like that, but you will probably find it on your keyboard. This tells MemoQ, I'm going to question a pi character. It's called a pipe. That's the name for this character. Don't ask me where it comes from. It's just called a pipe. This tells MemoQ that this is, so to say, the stem of the word, the fixed part to be used for matching. And when trying to highlight a term in your source text, don't care about this part. That is variable. All right. So if I go back to MemoQ, and I actually apply this change by clicking on the middle bottom and confirm this terminology entry, then you can see that now technologies is highlighted. The really neat thing about this is that you can do this on every single word of your term in case your term consists of multiple words. I currently have an English source and I don't want to mess around too much, but my sample glossary actually contains an entry which says, it's something I made up, Englischer Hof. Now you can imagine that in German it can really easily happen that you get a sentence where it says in Englischer Hof, and then of course this part is variable. So you can decorate this Englischer Hof entry in your German term base by just adding the pipe here, and then im Englischen Hof will be highlighted in your source text. So this is a very useful way to enhance your leverage if in your language the end of words tends to change. And for the time being, this only works for the end of words in MemoQ. So this was the first feature, which is prefix matching. Let me show you another neat feature, which is forbidden terms. Let's take a look at this one. This is also something that I just made up for this webinar. IT, supposedly to be translated as Informationstechnik in German. But let's say that I want to override that, and from now on I definitely don't want to use that term, but I want IT to be translated as IT. So again, I go into the editor for this term, and as a different term for this concept in the target language in German, I enter IT. This would mean that I get two results, but I also want to make the first one as forbidden. So I selected the first one in the list. In this tabbed control, I go to usage and I check forbidden term. Whatever you enter here refers to individual terms. So if I highlight IT now, that's not a forbidden term. If I highlight Informationstechnik again, that is a forbidden term. And now if I OK this dialog, MemoQ refreshes my results, you can see that the one that I marked as a forbidden term is showing up in black. And the other one, IT, is showing up in blue. And if you look at this pretty print area of the entire term-based entry, you can see that the first one is crossed out. It's a strike-through print. If I want to insert a forbidden term, then MemoQ refuses to do that and shows this funnily polite message. The term you chose to insert is marked as forbidden. You are discouraged from using it in your translation. And there is in fact a warning for this also if MemoQ encounters a forbidden term in your translation. And there's one last thing that I want to go into in some depth, and that is the case sensitivity setting of a term. If I take a look at IT, this is good. This refers to my source term. Let me go into the editor again. The funny thing is there are actually 3 case sensitivity settings available. I mean, case sensitive and case insensitive is fairly obvious. If I say case sensitivity no and apply that, I want to click OK to apply that. Then I get the lowercase it highlighted as well, which is definitely not something that I want to happen. But now let's take a look at the permissive case sensitivity setting. I'm going to add Kilgray, which is a proper name, as a term. So Kilgray will be translated as Kilgray. I just use the Control-Q shortcut to really quickly add this as a term. So this is exactly what I expect. But now, let me do a little bit of tweak and edit the source segment. So I'm going to type Kilgray in all lowercase and then in all uppercase here. Now if I use complete case sensitivity, then this uppercase K, lowercase Ilgray would not be highlighted in the second occurrence. But the default is permissive, so that's the middle one, and that means if a letter is uppercase in my term, then that has to be uppercase in the actual source segment. If a letter is lowercase in my term, then that can be either uppercase or lowercase in the source text. So that's why I think this permissive option is a very useful one for source terms. So that was about it for terminology, and I'm going to take a really sharp turn and move on and talk a little bit about live docs and translation memories. I'm going to basically be alternating between these two. First, a few words about live docs. I assume that most of you are already familiar with the concept of live docs. In the user interface, it shows up as a category on its own right here under translations. And you get to see a list of resources, more or less you get to see for translation memories. And in order for this webinar, I'm just going to create a new live docs corpus here, which I will call a webinar corpus, and add some content to it. The bottom part of the screen shows the documents that are part of the corpus that is selected at the top. If I select a different one, then the list at the bottom updates. None of these corpora that I'm selecting has documents in the English to German pair, so that's why the list remains empty at the bottom. But now let's add some new content. And what sort of content can that be? It can be bilingual documents, it can be monolingual documents, even binary files, or it can be alignment documents. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to add an alignment pair. Previously, alignment used to be a separate category. Now we moved it into live docs. So to add an alignment pair, I'm just going to use this link, add alignment pair. Browse to a location. I have a number of, well, these are English to Hungarian files. I forgot about that, but let's just pretend for now that English is English and Hungarian is German. And I open them and import them for alignment. MemoQ parses both files, runs the alignment algorithm automatically, and now it's become part of my corpus. Before I even open this file, let me just go to translations and add the exact same source document, but now as a translation document. If I open that for editing, then what you will see, as soon as it opens, is that mysteriously, even though there is no translation memory in my project, I start getting exact and fuzzy matches and even LSC or automatic concordance matches among my translation results. And these matches come from the alignment document which I added and which MemoQ indexed in the background silently. If I happen to encounter a position where the source seems okay, but there's something completely wrong in the target, well, that means that in that particular place, the alignment was out of sync. And I can correct that on the fly. This is what we call on-the-fly alignment. In order to do that, you just right-click this item, click Show Document. This is very similar to editing a term-based entry or a TM entry. In case of an alignment document, MemoQ just takes you to that alignment document to the exact segment in question. And if I decide that this is a wrong alignment, and really it should be these two segments that should be paired up, then I just create a synchro link right here on the spot to fix this alignment error. And as soon as I go back to the document, you can see that it's already the newly added corresponding target segment that MemoQ brings up as a translation result. So what is the best way to use live docs? Basically, we conceive of live docs, besides offering alignment on the fly, as a possible substitute for a TM. In many traditional workflows, there would be a separate step, which is called cleaning up translations into the translation memory at the end of your translation process. But really, what does such a step as cleanup have to do with the actual act of translation? This is a technical necessity that is forced upon us, or translators or project managers, by the nature of TM tools. So the idea with a live docs corpus is to just eliminate that step. You don't clean up a translation into your translation memory. Let's say you have your finished translation document. I'm going to emulate that by just copying source to target. And this is the final approved, revised, proofread version. And instead of cleaning it up, I just take this bilingual document and add it to my live docs corpus. I can select which corpus. There's only one now, so there's not a whole lot of a dilemma there. If I take a look at my corpus, you can see that now this showed up as a bilingual document in my corpus. There's a different icon for that on the left. This is a bilingual document. And if I go back, I will automatically, just by the mere fact of this document being there in the corpus, start getting matches, which is this one, this 100% match at the top that you are seeing. So this is to simplify TM management and eliminate the whole process of cleaning up into a TM and keeping track of this content into this big homogeneous container. Instead, you can just collect finished translation documents in a corpus. So this is the key difference between the translation memory and the corpus. And now I'm going to, again, take a fairly sharp turn. I hope I'm not confusing you too much in this webinar today, and talk about a feature which we added to MemoQ's translation memories not so long ago, and that is adding custom metadata fields to a translation memory. That is something that is not very well known in MemoQ now so far, so I want to go into that a little bit. I'm going to create a new translation memory, which I will be calling webinar TM. Well, let's make it a TM that allows reverse lookup as well, so you can use it in a German to English project later. And let's take a look at this tab here, which is for custom fields. There is already a custom field here, and I'll explain you in a moment why it is here, even though I did not add it explicitly. And it's called status, and it's a pick list that has the values translated, proofread, and published. Let me add another field, which is just going to be reliability. And let's make that a number field. So that's some field where you can enter a value between minus a big number and plus a big number. So it's a positive or negative integer. All right, so now I have these two custom fields in my TM. All right, there's my new translation memory. And let's take a closer look at settings. Here under user and meta information, you can find username, project domain, client, and subject. Those are the default metadata fields that exist in MemoQ. I didn't fill them when I created the project, but I will now. The project is going to be webinar project. Client is going to be Kilgray customer. Customers, all of you in plural. And let's say add the custom field status and make that published. And add reliability and let's make that 10. What this tells MemoQ is that whenever I confirm a segment into a TM, so whenever I store new content in my TM, these metadata values are going to be added and stored with the translation memory entries. Let me demonstrate to you how that works. If I go back to translations, open my doc sample file. I'm just typing something here and confirm that. Then if you take a look at the metadata panel at the bottom, you can see that for this match, which is now coming from the TM, project is webinar project, client is Kilgray customers, status is published, reliability is 10, and you can see who and when the entry was created by, when it was last modified and who it was last modified by, which TM it is coming from, and what is the match rate, obviously, which is the number we are definitely watching all the time. So this is how you can store custom metadata and in general metadata in a translation memory. And on a similar note, if you go to settings and TM settings, now I really wish I could make a poll on the fly because I would now like to ask a question to all of you. How many of you ever came to TM settings and changed anything in TM settings? Because that's what we are going to do now. Instead of using the default settings, I'm using create and use new. Excuse me, I'm going to clone the existing defaults. Webinar, TM, settings. And click Edit to go into that. Now, this is where the meat finally is. This brings up two fields that are quite relevant, and that is mesh thresholds. Minimum mesh threshold tells MemoQ is that as you're translating, as you're working in the translation grid, don't care about any match that is below 60%. If you lower this to 40%, you will get a lot of low score matches. Good match threshold is by default 95%, and this is an option when you use pre-translation. Remember, when you pre-translate a document, there's a group of options there that tells MemoQ what sort of matches to accept. You can go for only in-context matches, only exact matches, and there's the next one which says only good matches. Well, if you choose only good match, then MemoQ will only insert TM matches that are at least this score or better. Here in some other parts you can also add penalties either to users who created an entry, to an entire TM by entering the name of the TM, or to, if you go to filters, you can define filters which refer to either the default metadata fields or the custom metadata fields. What I'm going to do is I'm going to define a soft filter here. What was the name of the new field that I added to? I'm sorry, I need to go back here. It was reliability, right. Okay. So I'm going to add a new soft filter which says if reliability, which is a number field, is less than 50, then add a 10% penalty to that entry. The difference between soft and strict filters is that soft filters, which is what I'm defining now, just add the penalty. A strict filter excludes entries completely from the lookup. So if MemoQ hits an entry where the condition of any soft filter is met, then that entry will not be shown during translation. So both of these can be used to either compartmentalize a large translation memory or to prioritize matches coming from the translation memory. I also have a comment that some of you don't see the filter tab. That can be possibly because these filters are only available in the Project Manager edition of MemoQ, whereas custom metadata is available in all editions. All right, so now I added this new filter, and if I go back to my sample document, you can see that this entry, which was an exact match just a moment ago, is now down to 90%, and that is because of my filter. For those of you that in your daily work manage large translation memories for your translation agency or for your organization, this is probably all familiar stuff. It's a relative novelty in MemoQ, and one of the reasons for that is that the reason why we added live doc score perhaps is because that's a different approach to managing translated content. In a translation memory, you can go to great lengths to define your fields and maintain them and mark up all of your entries, who they are coming from, how reliable it is, etc., etc. And the same is also possible through a live docs corpus. Let me show you how. The key feature that we have for this in a live docs corpus is keywords. I can mark up every document with any number of keywords. When I say keywords, think of tags, which are very popular. Think of the way you can tag your emails in Gmail, for instance. So I can add a keyword here that says server, marketing, and IBM. That's 3 keywords. Okay, so far so good. I've got these keywords there. What use am I getting out of these? Well, the use I'm getting out of these is that similar to how you can define penalties for metadata when you're doing lookup from a translation memory, you can do the same for a corpus. Let me go back to settings and take a look at LiveDocs settings, which is a very similar list to what we've seen before. LiveDocs settings are also resources, light resources. Instead of using the default, let me create, clone the default, call it webinar corpus settings. Go inside, and you will see the first page is quite similar to what we saw for translation memories. In particular, you can define an absolute match threshold and a good match threshold. A corpus is something that gives you fuzzy and exact matches. You need the exact same kind of thresholds as you need for a translation memory. Just a second. You can also add penalties to users, entire corpora, etc. The exciting part begins in this More Penalties panel, where you can add penalties for any match that comes from a document that either has a keyword or does not have a keyword. So just to check that, let me add a penalty again of 10% for any match that comes from a corpus document that has the keyword server. All right, so I'm saving my settings. And if I go back to this document, which has a lot of content coming from bilingual documents, you can see that this first one, which comes from my bilingual document in the corpus, is now down to 90%, even though there is no apparent difference between the source and target. So I just ruined an exact match down to 90% by adding a penalty based on a keyword. Okay, so that was my sharp turn from custom TM fields into back to corpora and how to achieve the same or maybe even more by annotating entire documents that are part of a corpus. Just one more word on the custom fields in translation memories. If you want to use a set of fields for all of your TMs and you don't want to manually add them whenever you create a new translation memory, there's a facility for that. It's in Tools and Options. You can go to Miscellaneous. I must confess that we simply were unable to come up with the more descriptive and short name here. Eventually every software ends up having categories in different places that are just called miscellaneous. And if you go to default TM scheme, that's where you can define a number of fields which will be automatically added to the list whenever you create a new TM. While you're still in the new TM dialog, you can edit what you actually want to put into the new TM. But here you can edit the defaults, so you don't have to define them every single time. I have a question from Melissa, which says, why a penalty if server was not in segment? Okay, so server does not refer to the content of the corpus match. It refers to the annotation of the document in the corpus where that translation comes from. So that came from this bilingual document, and this bilingual document is marked up with 3 keywords: server, marketing, and IBM. And because the document has the keyword server, the penalty applied, because the match that we were looking at came from this particular document. So you add this metadata to the entire document in the corpus, and this is why I call it metadata. This is not the actual data in the segment. This is the extra annotation on top, the cherry on top. All right. I will leave this topic of LiveDocs versus translation memories for now, and steer on to a very, very different topic and talk a little bit about the other resources that we have in MemoQ. You already saw two such resources. One was TM settings, the other was corpus settings. I'm saying settings, but these are not really settings. Think of these as little content units that you can reuse. So you can define these settings, give them a name, that's what makes them a resource, and then just tick them to use the same settings without going through all the ticks and checkboxes and penalties. Use them in a different project. The central location where you can access all resources is this nerve center of MemoQ, the resource console. There's also a direct icon for this in the toolbar. Now this is, you could say, a formidable screen. I prefer to think that this is really a candy store. You get an overview of all the translation memories and term bases and LiveDocs corpora. So those are the three obvious resources that exist on your computer or that your computer is aware of from a server. You get to see more here than we did in the project because the corresponding lists that you see, for instance, in the LiveDocs panel in your project or in the translation memories panel of your project is filtered to show only items that are relevant for your project's language pair or your project's selected target language. Here in the resource console, you see everything. And then there are these 10 other types of resources that MemoQ can deal with. At the bottom, you can see TM settings and LiveDocs settings. What I want to go into here is definitely ignore lists, segmentation rules, and possibly also autocorrect lists. So I'm going to start this journey. This is a webinar of a lot of terms. Before I go into ignore lists, let me show you one more neat thing about spelling, which may not be so obvious, and that is how to enable on-the-fly spell checking. So the curly red underlines, which are currently not visible in this translation grid. But in order to enable that, you go to Tools, Options, Spell Settings, and you just check this top-level checkbox there, which says check spelling as you type. But doing that in itself is not necessarily enough, because in order to perform spell checking on the fly, MemoQ uses the open source Hunspell spelling engine, which has dictionaries for tons of languages, practically all languages as far as I know. But they are not included, they are not packaged with MemoQ. So the first time you start MemoQ, you actually need to download the dictionary that you will be using. And to do that, you go to this drop-down list here, select your language. Let's take a look at Lithuanian. Nope, I already have a dictionary for that. And then maybe Slovenian. This is what you will see the first time you start MemoQ. And then click Look for more dictionaries online. This dialog comes up where you can just click check. This is a free FTP site where the owners of OpenOffice host all of their dictionaries. And MemoQ has found that there are two different sets available. Most of the time, these are actually equivalent. So I will just go in for the bottom one and download that. It's as simple as that. You don't need to visit any website or do anything else. MemoQ even downloads the dictionary for you. For some languages, dictionaries, then you have a choice. Then this item appears in my list, and I just check it to tell MemoQ that this is the dictionary that I want to use for on-the-fly spelling, for any kind of spelling based on Hunspell for Slovenian. And after this, you will also start getting the curly underlines, as I did for German. Of course, everything is underlined because this is English text. Now, the other way of spell checking, obviously, is through the spell checking dialog, which can be invoked through the conventional shortcut of F7. Let me do that. And let's take a quick look at the options that are available when MemoQ finds a specific alleged spelling error. You can correct, and that will insert whatever is there to fix the spelling error. You can click skip, which will just skip this single occurrence, but the next time the same word occurs, it will be returned as a spelling error again. You can click skip all, which means no subsequent occurrences will be reported as a spelling error as long as the project is open. But as soon as you close this project, MemoQ forgets all the words for which you clicked skip all, and the one to permanently store a word to your ignore list. Common word for an ignore list is also a dictionary. So basically a list of correct words is to use add. But MemoQ, again, needs to be told where to add your new words. This means selecting an ignore list or dictionary, if you like. The message that shows up is warning me exactly about this and telling me how to set up an ignore list for my project. So I can go to ignore lists. I already have a couple here. I'm going to create a new one. I'm calling it webinar ignore list. It belongs to German. And now I told MemoQ to use this ignore list in my project. That means whatever is on this list will not be reported as a spelling error. Plus, this checkbox here tells MemoQ, whenever I click add, store the word into this ignore list. This is used because you can combine several ignore lists in the same project. So if I now go back to the spelling tab, I can comfortably click add, and then node, and then optimized, and then for, and then running, etc., are all added to my ignore list. Okay, I'm leaving the spelling checker dialog for a moment and taking you back to the resource console. And let's take a look at my ignore lists. Here's the one that I created, which is webinar ignore list. So this is a resource for MemoQ that you can edit, import, export, share on a server, do all kinds of things with it. If you click edit, you can actually see the items that are on this ignore list. You can change them, remove them, manually add new ones. You may ask, okay, so what is the reason for this extra complication? Why can't you just have a single dictionary and just add your new verse for that, a single dictionary for each language? But the reason we did it this way is actually at the cost of a few more clicks, maybe the first time you set things up, more flexibility. It is possible that a particular client is sending you documents that contains funny and unusual words, maybe proper names or something specific to that client, that you don't want to be reported as spelling errors over and over again, but only when working for that client. Because in some general subject matter or working for a different client, they may very well be spelling errors. So this way, you can pick which dictionaries to use for which particular clients. Plus also, you can reuse the same spell checking dictionaries, ignore lists, across several different projects, if you so choose to do. In order to even spare you the trouble of setting up a specific ignore list for every new project that you create, if you tend to work in a way that you create projects all the time, you can mark a specific ignore list as the default. And that is possible, again, under Tools and Options. And the very first category here says Default Resources. I'm just going to go to Ignore Lists, select German for the language, and click this item. This tells MemoQ that whenever I create a project from now on that has German as the target language, MemoQ will automatically memorize to use webinar ignore list in that project. This spares you the extra clicks before you could first click add in the spell checking dialog. Okay, that was about ignore lists, and we are nearing 6 o'clock, so I will not go into autocorrect lists, but I do want to show you how to easily change the way MemoQ segments content when you import it. And for that, let me go back to my silly document, which is this doc sample, and I'm going to open the original in Word. Now, for whatever reason, it showed up on the wrong monitor. So you see, I added two traps here, two mines, and one is this one, because a sentence starts with a word that is lowercase, because that seems to be the trend these days, and all these products have names that start in a lowercase, like iPhone, iPad, and MemoQ. The other one is this funny abbreviation which does not really exist, but perhaps I'm translating for an organization that does use this abbreviation a whole lot. So I actually introduced two segmentation errors here on purpose. This is something that should be split to 2 segments, but is by default not split into 2 segments. And this is an abbreviation that should not induce a segment break, but by default it will. Let me go back to MemoQ and just double check that this is in fact the case. If I take a look at the doc sample project document that I imported previously, then unless I messed with my default previously, what I'm going to see is indeed MemoQ not split from the first segment, and the other one is segment 4 and 5, which should really be a single segment, split into 2. Now, curing this second one, an extra abbreviation that is simply missing from MemoQ's list is the simpler one. Let me show you how to do that. To do that, you go to Settings and Segmentation Rules. By this time, you probably know what comes next. Clone and use new. So MemoQ has these default segmentation rules, which you cannot edit. You cannot change the defaults. One more word about that. I'll explain why. But if you want to use custom segmentation rules, you can do that. You first clone the existing one. My webinar seg rules, that's what I'm calling it. Now, this new resource is used for segmentation in your project. You go into Edit. And here's the important part. When you see this, don't panic. You don't really need to know about all of this. What you really need to know about is what's on the Custom Lists tab. And in particular, depending on language, you will have 1, 2, or 3 lists that are called abbreviation something. And what I'm going to do is just add Professor Doctor to the abbreviation long list. Prof. Dr. period, and add it to the list. So this is something that should be there but is not. Let's verify the effect of this. I'm going back to translations and re-import my document. As a matter of fact, I want to re-import it using the doc extract because that produces much nicer output. But trust me, this is not the trick. It would be the same if I use the default setting here. And now, magically, this sentence is not split into 2 anymore. And now there's only one thing remaining on our list, telling MemoQ to consider MemoQ an uppercase letter. That's as easy as it is. So if I go back to segmentation rules under settings, edit my seg rules, go back to custom lists, you can see that the very first list is the list of capital letters for your language. But the way this is set up, you can actually type anything here. It doesn't have to be a single letter. So if you type MemoQ like that here, then from that point on, the segmenter in MemoQ will consider MemoQ a capital letter, and if it's preceded by a period, it will start a new sentence. This is where I would add iTunes and all the other funny names as well, which are likely to cause segmentation problems like this. One last re-import for this document. It is at the time of importing when MemoQ performs the segmentation. And there you go. This is now split into a different segment as we intend it to be. And the word of explanation on why you cannot edit this built-in default any kind of resource wherever such a default exists, and for segmentation rules it sure does. The reason for that is that whenever you run a MemoQ installer, or whenever the automatic updater downloads a new build of MemoQ onto your computer, which happens with quite some frequency, about every 2 weeks or 3 weeks, it also changes a couple of built-in files. For instance, these default resources. So whenever we get reports that some abbreviation is missing in some language, or some funny, tricky segmentation situation in German needs to be addressed, and there are always new ones like that coming up for German, then we on our end can change the default segmentation rules, and we can be sure that when the installer deploys the new rules, which improve the import of document for the future, we are not overwriting anything that you have edited on your computer. So the default is always read-only and it's always untouchable. But if you want to make your own changes, you can just clone out of the default and then make your changes to this clone. So that pretty much covers all of my topics for this webinar because it's 6 o'clock. I'm a little bit sad that we didn't have time for views, but not so sad because we do have a separate webinar for that now. I think one has already been recorded, and we will also be presenting new webinars from that series. So let me go through the questions box, because there were some questions which I did not answer as I went. And if you have any questions at this point, then do feel free and ask, and I will be happy to respond to them. I'm always amazed how quickly the program opens during webinars. It takes several minutes. I can select the project. For me, from Anka, well, this possibly depends on your computer. On some not very, very new computers, MemoQ does take a little bit of time to load everything. Then we have the pipe character. Okay, when I was explaining about adding wildcards to mark the stems of words in a term, Sarah asked the question, surely that example will find anything that has Englische asterisk as a stem, even without the hope. Okay, let me create a German to English project for that and demonstrate that. Because this is best understood if we actually have the example in front of us. So I'm going to create a German to English project. I'm going to write up a document. So these are the ones that I added to this document. This is the text. Let me now import that into MemoQ. Let me pick the term base. This also demonstrates that for term bases there is no selected source and target language. They are completely language neutral in that sense. And why am I not getting my result? Let me take a look into this term base. Aha, I do need to add the pipe there, which I did not. So I'm adding the pipe as we discussed. Let me also add an asterisk to the end of Hof to tell MemoQ that I can expect anything after the end of Hof. And now if I come back to my document, then I get the Englische Hof, des Englischen Hofs, but not the Englische Mann. So it tells MemoQ where to stop looking for the root of the word for every single word in your term. I hope that explains the question about the Englische Hof. I have a question from Betty. When I tried to import a glossary from Excel into a term base, the preview looked good, but then all the cells were empty. Any thoughts on why this happened? Yes, I have a clue what might have happened here. For a term base, English, English UK, English US are three different languages. So it's possible that when you opened the term base for editing, you were looking at, say, English and German columns, but the glossary that you imported was actually marked up to go into English US, German Germany. If you go into, I will again use this term base as an example. I go into Properties and add, besides English, also English US, and besides German, also German Germany. So now my term base actually has 4 languages. And if I edit the term base, you can see, you always see 2 columns at a time, but those can be any 2 columns. So you can actually select English US and German Germany. And even though I have 6 different entries in my term base, none of these entries contain any term for this particular language, English US and German Germany. And this is probably what you ran into. Let me know if this is not the case. We will be happy to help. A question about live docs. Is the live docs something you have that your competitors don't? From Sarah. Well, that's a nice question. I would say there are basically 2 schools of CAD tools out there. One is the TM-centric tool, which is what MemoQ used to be up to 4.5, and the other one is the corpus-centric tool, which some other tools do. As far as I know, MemoQ is the one that has both worlds in the same tool. So you don't have to either go for corpus or for a TM. You can work either this way or that way within a single tool. You don't have to make a choice. A question from Melissa. Why a penalty? So, okay, I answered that one. A question from Yosia. You talked about adding a document that was translated in MemoQ to the live docs corpus. What is the advantage of that? I already have the text in the memory. You can have the text in the memory. It's up to you whether you want to make sure that after making all the changes, and this can be especially tricky in a scenario where several people are involved and there are many review phases, you just want to make sure that only the final variant gets stored. Then it's simpler to just store a final version of a document in a corpus than to make sure the TM does not retain any of the previous variants because it was not, so to say, properly cleaned up. If you work with a live docs corpus, then you have the document in its entirety. In the TM, you've got individual segments. Let me go back to the project to show you that. So this is the document that gives me matches from my corpus document. Let me just go into any random segment in here. If you've got this from a TM, then you only get a source and a target segment. If you have a corpus document, you can right-click, show document, and you can see the entire document, including preview, which is not available now because I disabled preview in the very beginning. But otherwise, you would get the full document, source, target, context, plus preview. So you can get an idea where really this translation is coming from. If you need to make a correction because you discover an error, you can make that correction right here. I just added an extra S. MemoQ remembers when the segment was last changed and who it was last changed by. You can add the comment, so you've got more context. That's, I think, another reason why I would say it has benefit to use to store a translated document in a corpus instead of just storing your translations in the large TM. A question from Sarah. I use Stedman's Medical Dictionary. Can I upload that into MemoQ? I'm not familiar with that dictionary. If it's just a word list, then you can basically, maybe with a little bit of manual tweaking, end up having that in MemoQ as an ignore list, and then it will function as a dictionary. If it's something different from that, then please just drop a mail to support, and we will see whether that is possible or not. A question, will you mention any other review or LQA, linguistic QA utilities from Manuel, like markup check or term consistency check, etc.? Well, I'd be very happy to talk about our QA module, but I think we have run out of time for that for this webinar. So we will definitely include that in a different webinar. How do I copy a local ignore list from my PC to a server version of MemoQ so other translators on my team can use it? Well, you don't specifically copy it. There's a very easy way to do that as with any other resource. Let me go into the resource console, the Nerve Center. Here's the ignore list. I'm selecting a server at the top, which is going to be the funny doesn't exist server. When I select a server at the top, my list contains two sorts of items, all the local ones and all the ones that are published or not published in the server. And what you do, you just select the local resource, click Share on Server, select a name that you want to use in the server, published ignore list, that's what I'm going to use here. Then MemoQ does the job in the background. And there you go. Oops, it's polished, I'm sorry about that. And there you go, now you have a shared server-based ignore list that you can use across multiple MemoQ clients. Which is the max size we can use safely in a document for translation or as a bilingual file for a glossary in LiveDocs from Dora. The max size you can use, I'm not exactly sure I understand the question. Do you mean how long a specific term can be? Do you mean how many segments MemoQ will cope with in a LiveDocs corpus? Or do you mean how many entries a term base will cope with? Or how many segments in a document? I'm happy to answer, but I'm not exactly sure which ones of these you are referring to. I'll get back to this. Okay, when you use pipes in a term base, what happens when you export it to CSV? Are the pipes dropped? That's a very nice question. The way this works, let me show you MemoQ's export. I'm just going to export this particular term base to CSV. Sorry, I need to click export. And take a look at the result in Excel. MemoQ basically adds an extra column after every term column where it stores all of this term level extra information. And these markers all go into that column. So if you look at technology, MemoQ actually puts the pipe in there, and in this next column, which tells about prefix matching, you can see this custom. That means prefix matching is not on or off, but look at the pipe characters right in here. So they do make it into the export. If you round trip a MemoQ term base by exporting it into CSV and importing it into a different term base within MemoQ, no information is lost. So I think that's a short and concise answer probably to your question as well. What happens if a file that is part of a LiveDocs corpus is changed externally by another program from Patrick? Well, once that file is part of the LiveDocs corpus, it is in the corpus. Whatever file it may have come from doesn't matter. You can delete it. It's already in MemoQ, so all of the content is stored in MemoQ. MemoQ doesn't rely on any external files, and that includes translation documents. So once you import a document into MemoQ, you can delete the file outside in the file system, and you will still be able to get an export. Everything is there in your MemoQ project. Every document, every corpus document, every translation document is self-sufficient. If a TM is selected by using LiveDocs to import aligned docs, will TM be automatically be updated with alignments? No. What you do then, if you want to put your alignments into a TM, let me go into our webinar corpus and open the alignment document. Once you're happy that your alignment is good and you're finished, you can go to the alignment menu and click Export to TM. And that will send all of these linked segment pairs as translation units to your project's primary translation memory. So that's how you can get content from an alignment document into a TM. Maybe you can have a webinar specifically for QA module. Yeah, maybe we want, that's possibly we will include in some other webinar. I'll keep that in mind. Okay, Dora asks megabytes or segments. I'm still not sure whether you refer to the size of a translation document or a corpus or a terminology. Basically, for translation documents, MemoQ is quite happy up to 100, 200, 300,000 segments per document, and those can be long segments too. So we are talking about a lot of words there. And for corpus, there is no theoretical limit. It's MemoQ is happy up to 1 million, 2 million segment pairs in a corpus. That should work fine. All right. I can see that a lot of people are already leaving. I think we should all do that. Thank you for being in this webinar today. Have a nice day or evening, and hope to see you again at a different webinar. Thanks, and bye.